Last week we built a crafting system, so now it's time to give the players something to craft. I'm AJ, and I'm an indie developer developing my dream game. And this week I built a modular weapon system that powers every weapon in my game, from pickaxes to hammers, swords and crossbows. I'll show you how the system works, and how easy it is to add new weapons to my game because of it. I'm really happy with how the modular structure of it came out, so let's first take a look at the big picture of how the system is set up. Here you can see it starts off with the player controller. This is the script that handles the player's input for movement and weapons and basically everything. It contains a list of weapons and the currently selected weapon, and each weapon implements this iWeapon interface. The interface is what is used to communicate between the player inputs and the weapon behavior. The interface has this useWeapon method, which is called basically every frame of the game, and the weapon context parameter is basically this class that contains the inputs the player is currently pressing, basically mouse position, the mouse buttons the player is pressing, and any other weapon related inputs that I may add in the future. The class also contains all the dependencies and methods for interacting with the other systems that relate to the weapons. The weapons in games have to interact with a fairly large number of different systems. They need to interact with the animations, they need to trigger player animations, they need to affect the player's movement. Some weapons may have small dashes or lunges, so they have to interact with the movement system. Many weapons, when you're using them, stun the player, so there's a small amount of time where the player cannot move when using a weapon. And there are many other systems that may be needed, like ammo or items if some weapons consume energy or ammunition, for example. The interface also has stuff for the visuals, since all of the weapons have different sprites and they may have some effects as well. And then the interface now is kind of an abstract representation of weapon. It's a representation of how the player interacts with the weapons. So then we need to have an implementation of the interface. So here we have two examples. We have an example of a ranged weapon and a combo weapon. And these weapon instances, first of all, are responsible for managing their own cooldown and input and other requirements to use the weapon. So basically, when these receive an input from the player, these decide whether to use the input or just ignore them. So some weapons, for example, would cause attacks when you click the mouse. Some may need you to charge the attack by holding the mouse, and some may attack continuously as long as you are pressing and holding the mouse. So I can define the kind of input behavior for each weapon separately. Additionally, I could also add other requirements for, as I said, ammunition like bolts or bullets, or some energy requirement, or whatever you may have for different weapons. And the combo weapon is a bit more relevant for my game, since my game has mostly melee weapons. And the combo weapon is basically a weapon where you have a list of attacks, and each of the attack has their own unique behavior, and then when you're attacking repeatedly, we cycle through each of the attacks. So you might have a slash and a swing and a smash kind of combo, where you have 3 different attacks in a row. And each of the attacks themselves are responsible for only their own behavior and their own cooldowns and such. They don't manage the cooldowns, but they tell the total combo how long they need to be on cooldown for. And then of course they define the behavior of the attack itself, basically the hitbox, the radius, the damage, and the offsets and whatever else you may need for the attacks. and they also define the visuals, and they create the visual effects and the particles for the attacks. And the cool part to me is that I can define new kinds of attack variants. If I want to have totally different attacks that do other kinds of behaviors, have different shapes for the hitboxes, or ones that spawn new particles, or whatever I might want. Maybe a hammer that spawns an explosion when you hit something, or anything really, then I can just create a new variant of the weapon attack, and it slots into the list of attacks very nicely. Now, as a software engineer, I have a tendency to over-engineer everything I make, and this is no exception. I started off with making the weapon attacks themselves modular. So now we would have modular weapons and modular attacks within the modular weapons. I wanted to make the damage behavior, the movement behavior, and all of the different effects their own modules for the attacks. And this would have been really neat, because then I would never have to touch the code base again. I could just change the modules that are used for the attacks. But of course, this turned out to be wildly over-engineered and much too complicated to actually fit the needs of the system. And this was in general just a good reminder of, what is it that we are doing here. We don't actually care about the code base that much. We are not making neat code. We are in the business of making games. So if the code supports the goal of making the game, then that's good. But once we kind of step over that line and we start making neat code for the sake of making the code neater, then it kind of loses the meaning. And so basically, I just have to remember that I don't actually care about the code, I care about the results. And guess who else doesn't actually care about the code? The players don't care about the code. They just care about how fun the game it is. As long as the game allows us to make the game we want, it doesn't cause bugs or crashes, and it performs fast enough, then nothing else matters. Then it can be just as spaghetti as you make it. And you should also think about building for what you need right now and not what you think you're gonna need. Because as you iterate on your game, you will have new ideas, and you realize your old ideas weren't actually that good and that they don't actually work in practice. So you need to kind of stay on your toes so you can iterate faster. And finally, you should make code that you don't feel bad about breaking. If you make code that you've invested so much time into that you would feel bad if you had to delete the code and do it all over again, then it's much too complex for two reasons. First of all, you've spent too much time on it if you already feel bad about breaking it. And secondly, if you feel bad about breaking it, now you have extra friction for making the changes that you know you need to make. Now let's take a look at the system actually in action. So here we have the game and the hammer attack. And let's take a look at the kind of code that is actually running this system. So if we go to the items and find the hammer, we can see that it has this weapon combo class we looked at earlier in the schematic, and it has this list of attacks, and it has this visuals component. And you can see the attacks implement the weapon attack script, and they basically each have a long list of different parameters. The parameters again control the cooldowns and the damage and the different timings of the attack. Basically, how much of a wind up there is there some kind of dash within the attack or a lunge, and then how long is the player stunned while doing the attack. Then they contain the different attack parameters, the hitbox radius, the offsets, and other parameters that relate to the attacks. And if I need more functionality, I will just add them here later. And finally, we have the different particles and the different effects for the attacks. This may have a pretty long list of particles and it's pretty poorly coded, honestly, but it works and it doesn't cause too much lag, so it's perfect the way it is, in other words. And let's also quickly take a look at the over-engineered version of this. So you can see the same hammer, and modular attack script itself is actually now super simple. But then we have all of these modules, which basically contains the same features, but now they are separated into their own modules. And while this kind of works, it's not any easier to make new weapons with it. It's actually a bit more difficult to maintain because now the different functionalities are in different places. And you know, you could argue that maybe this kind of structure is just wrong for this, but I don't have the time and I don't really care about figuring out how to make this systematically better. What I have right here, where I have this attack that is a little bit like slightly bloated maybe and has maybe too many responsibilities, but I know how it works and I can make the changes really easily, so it's perfectly good enough for me. And this is what you also want to have as your mindset when making games. Your systems don't need to be perfect, they just need to do what you need them to do for you. Okay, now that we've taken a look at how the system works and how the weapons are kind of set up, let's make a new weapon for the game. So I want to make a axe style weapon. I have a placeholder for an axe, but it's not implemented yet. But let's just start from scratch. Let's make a completely new axe. So how I make new weapons is basically I copy a old weapon that works, then I just rename it. So now we have our rusty axe. Then we're gonna find the icon for it. So I have this axe icon. And currently we also need to paste that into the visuals. And then we need to make sure that the visual is lined up properly. This way it will look right in the game. And the node here will be where the character is holding it in their hand. So that looks pretty good. Then we go to the different attack kind of scripts. But I want the axe to be a little different. The idea for an axe is that it's kind of a momentum-based weapon where you are wildly swinging it around. Now, the thing I want for it is that as long as you hit your target, then you can keep hitting. And if you kind of hit fast enough, then the cooldown is lowered, but if you wait too long or if you miss, then the cooldown is longer. That's kind of the idea. So we're gonna make a different script. It's gonna be called weapon attack momentum. And I don't know if the name makes sense, but that's what it's gonna be. Because I know what it means, and if I come up with a better name, then I will change it at that point. So this is all the stuff from the original attack code, and we're just gonna keep all that. It's totally fine. And we're just gonna add so this code change was pretty simple. We just added this cooldown reduction on hit, which tells us how many seconds do we reduce from the cooldown whenever we hit an enemy. And then if here in our attack script, basically we make sure that if we hit an enemy, then we reduce the cooldown by that amount. Basically we reduce the next attack time by some constant amount of time. And then we have to change our script here to use our new one. So we have to now copy paste the values here. And let's copy the effects as well so that we have the similar effects. These are pretty good effects for this attack as well, you'll see soon. And then let's think about the cooldown. Let's have the cooldown be 1 second, which is a pretty long cooldown for an axe-style weapon, but then let's have 0.6 seconds reduction when we hit an enemy. I think that might be pretty good. Then we want to copy it over here. And then some of the parameters here are a bit different. Let's have even longer cooldown, I think. And then the reduction will be a bit more. So now I think the cooldown will be half a second if we do hit an enemy. And let's see, what else? Is there anything else? We want to change the timings a little bit. Basically a little bit slower of an attack for the second attack. And we might need to change the timeouts also. Actually, I think we should. Yeah, let's make it so that the timeout is shorter than the original cooldown. This will make it so that if you don't hit any targets, then you cannot get to the next part of the combo. So you basically have to hit the enemies if you want to use the combo attack. I think that sounds like a nice idea. If it doesn't work, then we're gonna change it later. And then let's copy it for the last one as well. Here let's make an even longer. Well, here the timeout doesn't matter since this is the last attack of the combo. So the timeout just does it so that if you wait longer than the duration of the timeout to do your next attack, then we will reset to the first one. But since this is the last attack, it will anyway reset to the first one. So you can actually just have it at 0. And let's reduce the cooldown by 0.5. I still want the cooldown for the last attack to be a long duration. So let's not use a too much of a reduction here. And then the last attack will be kind of a stronger attack, so it will have a bit more range and knockback, and the values will be a bit higher here. And again, let's copy the attacks here. Here we forgot to copy the attacks over. Basically what I want here is that the first attack effect is mirrored. This way it will look like the player is swinging first to the right and then to the left. And then remove the original script. Now that should be pretty good. And then we just have to assign the new versions of the attacks. And you can see here now these are weapon attack momentum, when for the hammer they are just weapon attack. So they are using the new scripts we created. And let's take a look at it. Oh, we still need to actually give the player the weapon. So Rusty Axe, that's to the 5th slot. And there we go, we have our Rusty Axe. And yeah, you can see if we just attack, we are only, like I'm holding in the mouse button right now, and we are only doing the swings to the one direction. But if we actually hit the enemies, then we get these combo attacks, which is really cool. Now it also works if we hit the terrain, but I might want to change that so that we only can use the combo attacks if we hit enemies and not terrain. And there still seems to... Oh, I thought that there's some buggy behavior there, where sometimes the attacks reset even when we miss. But now I'm actually realizing that it's just because we hit these decorations. Like if I hit the... Let's see, if I hit the... if I hit the barrels, then the attacks do still reset. That's really cool. I really like that. I really like where these weapons are headed. And this is actually kind of a really fun idea for a weapon. It still needs balancing and more testing and fine-tuning, but it's a really good start, if I say so myself. That's sick. So yeah, that's it for my weapon system. Next steps I'm gonna do for it. I of course need to create a bunch of different weapons and then make the weapons better, more fun and more balanced. But that's gonna be a long-term task. It's what I'm gonna do during the whole development of the game. Like, it's not a thing I just finish over a weekend. It's more of an ongoing progress where I revisit it whenever I get more information on the kind of state of the balance and state of the things. In addition to that, I need to at some point implement some upgrades and stuff, where basically the player gains upgrades to the player character, and then these upgrades have effects on the weapons. I have an idea of how I'm gonna connect that. It's gonna be kind of through this it's gonna be through the attack context. Like, there's gonna be some kind of struct here in the attack context script that passes through the upgrades. And there's a couple of ways how you can structure the upgrades. And I'm not yet sure which I'm gonna do, but when I do decide, I might make a video on that as well, so I can then show you kind of how exactly it is that you implement an upgrade system into your already existing weapon system, because that's a challenge that you're gonna have as well, most likely, if you are making a game of your own. But yeah, if you need some help with your game stuff or you just wanna have accountability and community, check out the links in the description. You should watch my other devlog episodes right here if you haven't seen them yet. There I show off more of progress of my game. So see you in the next one. Bye.